In this video, we're going to explore which segment of the taxpayer population is supporting the government the most. I think we can all agree it requires some money to run the government. You got to pay for the whole apparatus. There's all kinds of services, healthcare, etc. that require money. And in Canada, the general revenues for Canada work out that about half of the revenue for the Canadian government and provincial governments comes from the income taxes. Of course, there are other taxes that go into that to make up the balance. But more than half, comes from income taxes. So you have to wonder who's paying these taxes. And luckily for us, Statistics Canada has put together all this data in a accessible form so we can see who's paying the taxes. So let's click around through there. So thanks to StatsCan here, we have high income tax filers in Canada. This actually includes data for all tax filers in Canada. So you can select the region you're looking at, the income levels. So let's start by looking at the bottom half of the taxpayer. So let's see what that is. That's everyone who makes less than $41,000 per year, which is quite a lot. Almost 15 million people. And let's see, they have an average income of $21,100, and on average they pay $1,300 in taxes, and you can see most of them don't pay anything at all, zero. So that adds up to a total of the share of provincial and federal territorial taxes. That adds up to 6.2% of all the taxes paid are paid by the bottom half of the taxpayers in Canada. That's not really very much. Let's see what the rich contribute here. So let's go to the top 10%. Okay, so that's everyone who makes more than $106,700 per year, around 3 million of those people. An average income of $190, that's pretty high. And those people contribute each on average $55,800 to taxes, which represents 54.4% of all taxes paid. So more than half the taxes paid is borne by the top 10% of the population. So let's go more extreme here. Let's see what the one percenters do. Let's see what they do for us. Those are people who make more than $271,000. Okay, I don't feel too bad for these guys. How much tax do they pay? They on average pay per person $230,000 in taxes, and that represents 22% of the total taxes paid. So the top 1% pay 20% of the way in taxes. So hey, thanks guys. So I know this kind of goes against the prevailing, eat the rich attitude. If you want to pay most of the taxes for the rest of us, I think we can only, enjoy that as much as we can. It's like the rich people who buy first class tickets. Full fare, first class. That's what I need. And you see them, they get the board first. They sit down first. They get the little, glass of champagne, and bowl of cashews or something. Only the most premium nuts for these people. And then so they're sitting there in the first class, and us plebs walk by and see them there enjoying themselves and all I can think when I walk by those guys is, hey man, thanks for subsidizing the rest of our vacation here, because your $10,000 plane ticket means that I only have to pay $300 for my economy class seat. I think there's an analog between that scenario and taxation in Canada. This whole eat the rich thing, I always laugh when I hear this. I always imagine this rich dude, fat probably, lying on the table, top hat and tails, probably a monocle, definitely a monocle, and I'm sitting there with a oversized comical knife and fork ready to dig in. Eat the rich. I mean, as a slogan, it's pretty good. I like the slogan. It's a visceral slogan. It looks pretty good on a sign. But ultimately, I think it's a bit misguided. So wait, what's the phrase? Give someone a rich person and they'll eat for a day. Teach them to be rich and they'll eat for life. Something like that. No, I think that's about fish, isn't it? That fish phrase, give a man a fish, he'll be satisfied for one day. Teach a man to fish, and he'll be satisfied for the rest of his life. That phrase, has almost a biblical connotation with the fish in there. I don't know, it has some sort of ancient wisdom inside of there. Turns out that was entered into the English lexicon by this woman here, Anna Isabella, or Lady Ritchie, Victorian era author. Probably never did any fishing or cooking or anything like that on her own. So it's kind of funny that this bit of wisdom enters into into the English language through this out of touch rich person. Yeah, if you're going to tell me to eat the rich, you'll probably tastes pretty good. Let's eat her. While we're on the topic of eat the rich, this phrase or this idea comes from Enlightenment era philosopher Rousseau. So we're talking, pre-revolution France, 1750s, around there. Rousseau, again, another old rich dude, pretty handsome guy. Eat that guy, but his pretty good too. This guy wasn't one of the common people. He wasn't suffering down, toiling in the fields, right? It's kind of amazing that this eat the rich comes from this rich dude. So to quote Rousseau, quand le peuple n'aura plus rien à manger, il mangera le riche. So when the people have nothing more to eat, they'll eat the rich. And, this was aimed squarely at the French nobility at the time. And, man, you want to talk about wealth inequality. You think you're living it bad now. Imagine being, pre-French Revolution France inequality. Basically the top handful of people own the whole country. And if you're just a commoner there, your life sucks. I think comparatively we're doing pretty good. Sure, they guillotine some people, including the king, Louis XVI, Marie Antoinette, chop their heads off. And turns out that didn't really redistribute the wealth that well. Things still kind of were not so great if you were poor in France at that time. And even that phrase, the eat the rich, or the French version as Rousseau would have said it, even that phrase became to take on a sarcastic tone as an example of the revolution's failure to deliver this main goal of redistributing the wealth. And the real reckoning for redistribution of wealth didn't come until World War I, which I don't want to make light of the situation. It's a horrible war, but that was a hard reset for Europe in terms of wealth redistribution. And coincidentally, World War I is the advent of income taxes in Canada. It was introduced as a temporary measure for supporting the war effort in Europe. And you can imagine if you're the government of the day, or more importantly, the government after the war, thinking, well, we already tricked these guys into paying taxes. Why would we stop that money flow now? So it'll come full circle. That's how we have to pay taxes now. And more than 100 years later here in Canada, we're still paying income tax, and I don't see it going away. So I'm not saying go out there and thank a rich person for their contribution to the government. They're doing fine. They're doing all right. Don't worry about them. But maybe you can understand a little bit better the breakdown of who contributes to the tax base in Canada. Why do we always put a nose to the